Very good morning, everyone. This is me, Priyanshu from 2BSc Economic Honors, and these are my friends, my fellow classmates. This is Pragya and this is Tanishq Sharma. So today we are here for a video presentation. We are going to explain you the Keynesian economics and the theories he proposed and the core principles of Keynesian economics that he proposed in his book during the 1929 to 1940 World Economic Depression. So, without taking much of your time, let's begin. So, Keynesian economics, introduced by John Maynard Keynes, revolutionized macroeconomic thought by challenging classical economic theories. His seminal work, his book, named The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, published in 1936, emphasized the role of government intervention in mitigating economic downturns and sustaining growth. Keynes developed his theory in response to the Great Depression, observing that economies do not always self correct efficiently. He argued that fluctuations in aggregate demand drive business cycles, leading to unemployment and recessions. Unlike classical economists who relied on market self regulation, Keynes proposed active fiscal and monetary policies to stabilize economies.
Now, let's discuss about the core principles of Keynesian economics. First is aggregate demand and economic activity. At the core of Keynesian economics is aggregate demand, which refers to the total spending on goods and services within an economy. Keynes argued that insufficient demand leads to unemployment and economic stagnation. When consumer spending and private investment decline, business cut production and jobs, further reducing income and spending, a vicious downward spiral. Keynesian policy suggests that government spending should compensate for this shortfall, restoring demand and economic stability.
The multiplier effect. A fundamental Keynesian concept is the multiplier effect, which explains how initial spending increase in economic output by a greater amount. Mathematically, the multiplier is 1 upon 1 minus MPC, where MPC, marginal propensity to consume, represents the fraction of additional income spent rather than saved. For instance, if the government invests in infrastructure, workers earn wages, leading to increased consumptions, which in turn stimulates business revenue and job creation. This cascading effect amplifies the initial government expenditure, leading to a greater economic recovery.
Now, let's discuss the third core principle of macroeconomic theory, which is liquidity preference theory. Keynes introduced the liquidity preference theory, explaining why people prefer holding money instead of investing it, especially during uncertain times. You never know. He identified three motives for holding money. First, the transaction motive for routine expenditures. Second, the precautionary motive as a safeguard against unexpected cost. Third, speculative motive to capitalize on future investment opportunities. During recessions, liquidity preference rises, reducing investments. Keynes suggested lowering interest rates to encourage borrowing and stimulate economic activity.
Next is the role of expectations and animal spirits. Beyond technical factors, Keynes highlighted animal spirits, the psychological factors influencing economic decisions. In times of pessimism, businesses delay investments, worsening economic downturns. Conversely, excessive optimism can lead to asset bubbles and instability. Policymakers must for these psychological elements when formulating economic strategies.
Now let's talk about government intervention. Keynesian economics supports active government intervention to manage economic fluctuation. This is achieved through fiscal policy and monetary policy. Fiscal policy, adjusting government spending and taxation to influence demand. During recession, increased spending and tax cuts stimulate economic activity. During inflationary periods, reduced spending and higher taxes prevent overheating. Monetary policy. Central banks regulate the money supply and interest rate to influence investment and consumption. Lowering interest rates boosts borrowing while increasing them controls inflation.
So, after discussing about the core principles of macroeconomics theory, Let's talk about the relevance to macroeconomic issues. So, firstly, I would like to begin with unemployment, which is a very big issue even in today's economic era. You might all agree about it. So, Keynes emphasized that unemployment results from inadequate demand, not voluntary decisions. His solution was government led job creation, such as Roosevelt's New Deal, which employed millions in infrastructure projects.
Next is inflation control. Keynes acknowledged that excessive government spending can fuel inflation. To prevent this, Keynesians advocate counter-cyclical fiscal policies, reducing spending and raising taxes when inflation rises.
Now let's talk about business cycles. Keynesian also proposed a system to manage the business cycle. Keynesian policies counteract business cycles, recession, increase government spending, boost demand. Boom, reduce spending prevents excessive inflation and financial bubbles. This stabilizes economic growth over the long term.
Now let's hear about the real world application of Keynesian economics, such as the first time the Keynesian proposed his theory in his book which was published in 1936. It gave the solution for the Great Depression of 1929 to 1940. So let me narrate you about it. So the Great Depression exposed the limits of classical economics. Roosevelt's New Deal, based on Keynesian principles, expanded government spending to create jobs, revitalize demand, and restore economic stability.
Next is post World War II economic policies. After World War II, Keynesian strategies guided economic recovery. Governments invested in infrastructure, education, and welfare, driving sustained economic expansion and high employment rates.
Now finally, 2008 financial crisis and Keynesian resurgence. The 2008 financial crisis revised Keynesian policies as government launched stimulus packages to prevent economic collapse. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act 2009 injected $787 billion into the US economy, stabilizing demand and restoring growth.
Now, at last, we would like to talk about the diverse theoretical perspectives and criticisms. So, the key criticisms in the macroeconomic theory were, while Keynesian economics remains influential, it faces criticisms from alternative theories. So, the very first comes the classical economics. It advocates for market self-regulation. The second comes monetarism, which was given by Milton Friedman, also called as Friedman's theory. It argues that controlling the money supply is more effective than fiscal policy. Third comes the supply side economics, emphasizes tax cuts and deregulation to boost production. And the very last, the fourth one comes new Keynesian economics, updates Keynesian ideas incorporating price and wage rigidities to justify strategic government interventions. So here we are to the end of this video, and I would like to conclude on behalf of my team for this topic, Keynesian economics. So Keynesian economics has transformed macroeconomic policy, emphasizing the importance of aggregate demand and government intervention. From the Great Depression of 1929 to the 2008 crisis, Keynesian principles continue to shape economic stabilization strategies. Despite criticisms, Keynesian economics remains a cornerstone of economic thought, offering valuable tools for managing unemployment, inflation, and business cycles. So, here we come to the end of this discussion.
Thank you.
I
Thank
hope
you.